Do you want to?
Welcome to the Weather Insights Tropical Update. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner, and still have a very, well, compared to what we've seen the last few weeks, pretty active Atlantic right now. We've got tropical or disturbance number one. National Hurricane Center has reduced the chances of this to develop over the next 7 days now to 40%. We'll talk about that in a little more detail, why that decision was made. But the ensemble modeling is definitely showing um, less interest in this particular disturbance now. And then we have disturbance number two, which has a 90% chance of development. That'll likely be our next named storm. 90% in the next 7 days, 60% in the next 2 days. And then we have Tropical Storm Kirk, which is going to be a major hurricane in the next few days. Right now, it's Tropical Storm Kirk with winds of 60 miles per hour. Will likely be a fish storm with shipping interest in Kirk. And then we have Tropical Depression Joyce, which is really a non-factor. So three areas really non-factors, and Jeff, one in the Caribbean becoming less and less a non-factor. Looking at the infrared satellite, Kirk's looking pretty impressive out there. But boy, that disturbance in the Western Caribbean definitely is not looking very impressive. But there is some moisture out there, so something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean we got some showers and thunderstorms down here. We got this big upper low. This spin here is not at the surface. This is up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So that's not what's going to produce the system. As this comes west, it may help kind of vent this area down here off of the coast of Honduras and Nicaragua, and help some surface low spin up. But the models have been kind of pulling back on this. And like I've been saying for the last several days, this is not Helene. This is, even though there's some similarities here with Helene with respect to where the Hurricane Center thinks there's going to be formation. That's about where it stops. The upper level conditions in the Gulf of Mexico are not as favorable for development with this. There's likely to be a good deal of dry air coming down from Texas and the Gulf, behind some fronts this week, and there's just a lot of differences with the lean. Just because people are like, oh, it's only a week later, but a week later can make a big difference in the atmosphere about the conditions out there. And this will probably be the big one over the next week here. Kirk coming up, becoming a major hurricane. The Hurricane Center is kind of down the middle road of the intensity guidance on this, so definitely this could be stronger than a category 3. I think right now they bring it up to 120, 125. It could be stronger than that. And what's interesting is finally out here, and as we get into October, the conditions have finally become favorable for tropical storms and hurricanes and big hurricanes to finally develop. And we haven't had anything like this year yet. So this is the first kind of open sea event. This is not going to affect any land area. Okay, you can clearly see here, Bermuda's over here. This is going to turn up north and off into the North Atlantic. So the Caribbean's fine. The east coast of the U.S. is fine. And this is a pretty high confidence forecast track. It's not going to come up here and hook a left or something like that. It's not going to happen.
Maybe some swells could reach the East Coast potentially, Jeff. Something like that. That's about it, though.
Yeah, and this will be a big wind filled storm, so we could definitely get some wave action. Maybe after next weekend, towards the early part of the next week, as this comes up here and generates the swells that can come over. But this is the ensembles. I always like to look at the ensembles, and a couple of things have happened over the last few days. One, the development time frame for this Western Caribbean, Southern Gulf of Mexico system has started to push back a little bit, and that's always kind of a red flag in model land of, oh, is this really going to transpire? Is this really going to happen? And the other thing is the ensembles have become increasingly less aggressive with this. And so you can see this is for noon Saturday, and you can see this is the GFS, and you can see that there's out of 35, 40 members, there's only a handful of them that even develop this anymore. So that's why we've seen that percentage drop down a little bit from 50 to 40% here, with the potential for the development of this. Yeah. And then if you look at the European ensembles, a little bit more aggressive, more members developing it, kind of two separate areas. There's still this area down here to the southwest that the European continues to think something may try to form, and then kind of this other area up here in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And so this tends to be probably the more favored situation. Clearly, there's some sort of front coming down in the U.S. at this point, potentially by this weekend, that could again bring dry air down here and shear. And we're getting into October now. The fall ish type pattern is starting to evolve across the United States. And so it's harder for these tropical systems, and especially as you start to get in the Gulf of Mexico sometimes, to have those favorable conditions like we saw with Helene last week. And so, another thing, this is not coming to Texas.
Yeah.
And, I fielded more questions. And let me go back to this graphic for a second.
Yeah.
This is not a forecast cone. Okay. It looks like one, but that's not what this is. This is a area where we could see development. So a tropical system could form anywhere in this hatched orange area. This is not a forecast that's going to move in this direction. This is just an area of potential formation of a tropical system over the next 7 days. The actual track of this is likely going to be off to the east and northeast towards Florida, towards the west coast of Florida. That's the upper level steering is in that direction. And so, I keep getting these questions, this thing, and I get it. You look at this graphic and it looks like it's heading towards Texas, Louisiana, but that's not what this graphic is showing. And that's not what's going to happen. This is a pretty good situation where we do not anticipate this coming up to the Texas coast, especially with the fronts coming down, this time of year. It's really difficult this late in the year to get tropical systems into the Texas coast. We've only had one or two hurricanes after October 1st make landfall on the Texas coast. So, never say never, but this particular system does not right now pose a threat to the Northwest Gulf of Mexico.
And since we have two hatched areas, Jeff, another way to look at it too, okay, you look at the orange X, there's an arrow, okay? That means that it has to move into that orange hatched area before it has a chance of forming, whereas the red X is already in the red hatched area, and that has a 90% chance of development. So it could form at any time. It doesn't really have to move very far to be able to form. Yeah. So to your point, and I can see that why, that arrow might confuse people, but that is saying that it has to move into that hatched area to be able to form. And still at that, it has this 40% chance. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that trend to continue to come down.
Yeah. There's the potential here, nothing forms. Like I said, like we showed, the ensemble guidance is pulling back on this. And I think if something does form, it's going to be weak. It's going to be probably a tropical storm. It's probably going to be heavily sheared and very lopsided, where it's weighted on the eastern side. The western side is going to be dry. And so things don't. This is my point. This is not Helene. The setup is not Helene. And the intensification is not there for that type of a setup. And so we could potentially see this pulled back a little bit more. And if that's the case, maybe nothing even develops out of this. Who knows? But we'll keep an eye on it over the next few days, and
we'll keep an eye. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, and even if something doesn't form, it could still bring moisture and rain to Florida and Louisiana in that area.
Yeah, it could. We'll see how it interacts with the incoming mid latitude weather. But
yeah,
I mean, looking at some of the stuff today, it hooks it more east over towards Tampa and then offshore, which is good. We definitely don't need to string moisture out up into the southeast United States and all the horrible things that are going on in North Carolina and all that with Helene and the recovery that's going to be going on up there for a while. We don't need any moisture and tropical systems moving up in that part of the world. So keeping this down further south and all that is the best case scenario right now.
Absolutely. And keep it right here on Weather Insights. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel and make sure you turn on those notifications and join us for the next Weather Insights briefing. Jeff, thank you very much.